Welcome everybody to Forza Horizon 4, and today we're taking a look at the 1993 McLaren F1. Now this was produced between 1993 and 1998, with 106 of them being made, which I know doesn't sound very much, but when you consider these cars took 3.5 months to build, then that is a fairly decent amount. It was designed by Gordon Murray and Peter Stevens, and yeah, it was the first production road car to use a complete carbon fibre reinforced polymer monocoque chassis structure. It also has Brembo brakes and cast magnesium 5-spoke wheels, which are very light, but be warned if you ever set fire to magnesium, it is really rather a hard piece of material to put out. So yeah, be warned on that one. But yeah, compared to the XJ220, which we reviewed in the previous episode, this is really rather different. It's lighter by 401 pounds at 2,840 pounds. It's got a much larger engine, much more power, a little bit of extra torque. It's faster in terms of acceleration and of course in terms of top speed, and yeah, in terms of outlook as well, because this was produced to be the ultimate road car, and in a lot of ways it is that. But me personally, though I do respect it a great deal, I far from love it. Sort of like it in some ways, but yeah, far from love it. One of the unique aspects of this car is obviously the free abreast seating, more commonly found in something like a Ford Transit, but you get a central driving position like you're in an F1 car, which is one of the inspirations for this kind of car, is to be like an F1 car for the road, but far more comfortable and far more practical, as you can see. One thing that really surprised me while looking into this car is how much equipment it actually has on it for a car that doesn't weigh all that much. It has air conditioning, electric windows, it's obviously got 3 seats, which is one more than most sports cars like this have, or supercars, or if you can really say, this is probably the first hypercar. And yeah, really rather well appointed, quite frankly, as you can see by the numerous amount of buttons that are either side of the driver as well as on the dashboard. So yeah, really surprised me by how well appointed it is. I mean, you compare it to the likes of the F40, which only came out a few years before this, which was the first car to break the 200-mile-an-hour barrier, that had no carpets, no real interior whatsoever, no radio, no aircon, none of that, and yet that only just managed to break 200 mile an hour, whereas this can do a hell of a lot more than that. And all of that is primarily down to the engine, which is under here. They use gold foil to help the exhaust manifold, and yeah, it's a 6.1 litre V12 engine producing 627 horsepower and 480 pounds-feet of torque, sourced from BMW. So McLaren didn't actually build this engine, but there were some requirements that they were asking for from BMW for the engine that they wanted, and yeah, it's a monster of an engine. Far bigger than the likes of the XJ220, which only had a 3.5 litre twin turbocharged V6. So yeah, despite the fact that this isn't forced induction on this engine, it produces a lot more horsepower, a little bit of extra torque, but yeah, is impressive purely because it isn't forced induction, and which is the same for a lot of hypercars that have succeeded this in terms of acceleration and top speed. They are all forced induction, be it the Bugatti Veyron or the Koenigsegg. They are forced induction. So yeah, it's really rather impressive that a car from the early 90s is this quick, while not having forced induction, not having all-wheel drive, not having any of that. So yeah, let's nonetheless get out onto the open road and see what it can do. So yeah, there are a few reasons that are stopping me from loving this car, one of which is the looks. I'm just not a fan of them. It really doesn't look like any real effort was ever put into them, quite frankly. Another thing I'm not a massive fan of is the balance of the vehicle. 41% of the weight is up front, so a massive 59% of the weight is at the back, which for the most part isn't really good enough, quite frankly. A car with more than 600 horsepower really should be as balanced as possible, and this isn't, which means that it's really rather easy to get it into a slide, which in an ordinary car, when you've got not very much power to deal with, is fine, but in this, when you've got more than 600 horsepower and you're able to go the speeds that you're able to, it's really rather nerve-wracking at times. Granted, it does keep you on the edge of your seat, and does make it pretty tense drive, but when you just want to enjoy a vehicle, it's not the best kind of setup, quite frankly. But because it doesn't have all that much in the way of weight, it does stop really rather well, and because it doesn't have that much in the way of weight, it's also really rather quick in terms of acceleration. 0 to 60, oh dear, sorry about that, in 3.4 seconds, 0 to 100 in 7.7 seconds, and it will go on to a massive 242 miles an hour, which is a record that wasn't beaten for a long time in terms of production road cars. So yeah, really monstrously fast, and surprisingly, for the most part, outside of the balancing issues, really rather good in terms of handling. Really rather easy, far easier than you'd expect from a car from the early 90s with this amount of power and this amount of speed on the go. But yeah, that balancing issue does make it a bit nerve-wracking at times. But then again, maybe that's the whole point, but to me personally, I'd rather enjoy a car rather than be scared of it gonna crash or spin out or anything like that. But yeah, surprisingly though, despite all this power and the lack of weight, it's not a massively quick car over the XJ220. Granted, it is faster in terms of top speed by 25 miles an hour, which is rather a large gap, but there's only 0.4 of a second in it in terms of 0 to 60 time, and only 0.3 of a second in it in terms of 0 to 100 time, which again, when you consider that this has more power, it's a lot lighter in terms of weight, and yeah, got a little bit more torque as well, is really rather surprising really. And yeah, I on the whole do prefer the XJ220. I know it's not the quicker car, I know it's not the most technologically advanced car, I get that. This certainly was a groundbreaking car when it came out, but in honesty, I do prefer the XJ220. I do prefer it in terms of looks, I do prefer it in terms of how it drives. It might not be the most exciting car to drive ever, but it is a fun car to drive nonetheless, and yeah, the power is useful most of the time. It's usable a lot more of the time than this, for instance, because I feel it's a lot more of a better balanced car, and yeah, you can easily spin out like that. Granted, I'm not the best driver in the world on this game, so yeah, maybe it's just me, but yeah, I do feel like the balancing is a little bit off really for a car that has this amount of power and this amount of speed on the go. But yeah, like I said, I do really respect it. I respect it for what it did. I respect the fact that it's still able to hold a candle to modern supercars and hypercars. There's not many cars that can go quicker than this to 60, and there's certainly all that many that can go faster than this in terms of top speed. So yeah, really do respect it, but at the end of the day, I don't love it, which is a bit of a problem when it comes to you know, enjoying a car. If you don't love it, then you're not really going to enjoy driving it quite as much as other cars. But nonetheless, yeah, it is still a really rather you know, entertaining vehicle to drive, just purely in terms of the top speed that it can get, and yeah, in terms of what it can still do in comparison to modern cars. So yeah, pretty damn good car, but not something personally that I'm ever going to put in the top 10, that's for sure. Nonetheless, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.